The moment, everything changed. Here is what Willow believed when she walked into Drew's room at the start of this week. She believed she still had him. She had adjusted the dosages. She had managed the timeline. She had kept the world outside that room operating under the assumption that Drew Kane was a stroke victim making frustratingly slow progress. She had handled Detective Joe. She had managed the narrative around Alexis. She had even allowed herself a moment of something close to composure, telling Drew, with that particular brand of cruelty dressed up as reasonableness, that she would let him go if he weren't so vindictive. Let him go. As if she were doing him a favor. As if the man she had shot twice in the back, the man she had been chemically imprisoning for weeks, was the problem in this relationship. That sentence alone tells you everything you need to know about where Willow is psychologically right now. She has rewritten the story so many times inside her own head that she has started to believe the version where she's the reasonable one. Where Drew's refusal to simply accept his situation is the real obstacle. Where her actions, however monstrous, are justified by the necessity of protecting what she's built. That kind of self-delusion is both completely understandable and absolutely terrifying. Then Kai arrived. On the surface, it was ordinary. He was there to pick up a hard copy of Willow's daycare proposal. Mundane, administrative, the kind of errand that happens in the background of real life constantly. Willow stepped away. Just for a moment. Just long enough.
And Drew moved.
Not dramatically. Not in a way that would have been visible to anyone not watching for it. He knocked over Willow's medical bag. A small, deliberate motion. The kind that requires planning, requires timing, requires a mind that is fully operational even when the body is still catching up. And then he turned his eyes to Kai. And he blinked. One controlled, intentional blink that said everything a paralyzed man cannot say out loud. Don't tell her. Don't let her know. I can communicate. I need you. Kai understood immediately. When Willow came back into the room, he told her he had knocked over the bag himself. Casual. Unremarkable. And then he left with the papers, carrying the weight of what had just passed between them. Now let's talk about what that moment actually means, because the show wants you to feel it as a physical turning point, and it absolutely is. Prior to that blink, Drew's situation was defined entirely by isolation. He could hear everything. He could feel everything. He was aware of every conversation Willow had in that house, every detail of the conspiracy, every plan, every moment where someone casually discussed his future as though he were furniture. But awareness without connection is its own kind of paralysis. The blink changed that. Drew now has a channel. A single, fragile, precious channel to the outside world. And Willow, who is smart enough to run a congressional office, smart enough to have managed this entire deception for weeks, felt at the moment she came back into that room. She didn't know exactly what happened, but she knew something had. The energy had shifted. The dynamic had moved. And when she looked at Drew, she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, or rather, she finally noticed what had been there for a while and allowed herself to fully register it. The stoned, distant quality is gone. His eyes are expressive, present, watching her with an intelligence that she had been telling herself wasn't there anymore. Drew isn't just recovering physically. He has been awake this entire time, listening,
Cataloging.
building a case in his mind that he cannot yet deliver, but is absolutely preparing to. He heard Willow taunt him about double jeopardy, about how she can't be retried for shooting him. He heard her admit it was the injections, not a stroke. He heard every conversation between Willow and Jack, between Willow and Nina, the discussions about leverage and black boxes, and what to do if the drugs ran out. He heard Jack casually suggest finishing him off. He heard all of it. And now he has found a way to start letting someone else know. Willow stood in that room after Kai left and said something that deserves to be heard very carefully. She told Drew that the harder he became to control, the more creative she would have to get. And then she told him not to force her hand. Told him she would not let her children be taken from her again. That is not the language of someone managing a situation. That is the language of someone who has already started to cross back toward the darkest option available. The thought that Jack planted, finish him, is sitting in Willow's head now. She told Drew as much. She let him see that she's thinking about it. Whether that was a threat or a warning or simply the unfiltered panic of a woman losing control of the one thing she needed most to hold, the effect is the same. Drew now knows his life is in active danger. Not theoretically. Not as a distant possibility.
Right now. Today.
And Kai is walking out of that house carrying the knowledge that could save him if he moves fast enough. The race to Winmere. On the other side of this crisis, Nina Reeves and Jack Brennan are preparing for what might be the most consequential treasure hunt in Port Charles history. Winmere, the Cassadine estate on Spoon Island. Gothic and sprawling and full of the kind of architectural secrets that accumulate when generations of morally complicated people live in the same stone walls. Valentine sealed off passages when Charlotte was young. Cullum took up residence with his WSB loyalists. And somewhere in that castle, in a safe, in a laboratory, in living quarters, in a passage that hasn't been opened in years, there may be a black box that changes everything. The working theory is straightforward enough. Cullum was the last person known to have the box. He took over Jack's WSB office, demanded the combination, which Jack refused to give, and at some point, the box moved. Since Cullum was living at Winmere, and since Spoon Island is now empty with Sidwell jailed and Levesque vanished and Cullum himself dead, the logical conclusion is that Winmere is where the search begins. But here's the variable that nobody fully accounted for: Jocelyn Jacks. Jocelyn, who works with Jack, who knows Winmere in a way that Nina's years-old floor plan cannot fully capture. When Jack starts asking questions, Jocelyn tells him things, specific things. The safe. The lab in the sub-basement. Cullum's probable living quarters. She maps out the geography of possibility in a way that gives Nina and Jack an actual search strategy rather than a blind sweep of an enormous property. This detail matters more than it might initially seem. Because Jocelyn, by providing this information, becomes inadvertently entangled in a search that she doesn't fully understand the stakes of. She's helping her boss find a missing item. She doesn't know that item contains evidence that's actively being used to keep a man imprisoned in his own body. She doesn't know that finding it or failing to find it could mean the difference between Drew surviving this situation and Drew not surviving it at all. The innocence of Jocelyn's involvement is almost painful against the backdrop of what the box actually represents. Now let's talk about what's inside it, because the contents deserve serious attention. The evidence linking Drew to Judge Eva Heron's death. Traffic cam footage that could place Willow at the shooting scene.
These are not abstract files.
These are the specific tools of blackmail and leverage that Willow intends to use against Drew, not to prosecute him, but to hold over his head. To tell him, explicitly, that if he speaks, she will destroy him with what she knows. It's the kind of strategy that only works if Drew is afraid. And increasingly, Drew does not seem like a man who is afraid of consequences. He seems like a man who is furious, patient, and building toward a confrontation that no amount of chemical intervention is going to prevent indefinitely. There's also the question that nobody has fully answered yet, the one that makes this entire Winmere mission an exercise in organized uncertainty. What if the box isn't there? Cullum was not a man who operated carelessly. He was a WSB director. He understood the value of leverage and the mechanics of secrecy. Is it possible that he moved the box ahead of wherever he was planning to go next? Jack has been unable to find records indicating a transfer destination. But the absence of records doesn't mean a transfer didn't happen. What if the box is already in someone else's hands? What if it's in the possession of whoever is behind the larger conspiracy, the shadow player that Sonny's investigation keeps circling without landing on? What if the very evidence Willow and Nina are counting on to save themselves is already being weaponized against them from a direction they haven't looked? The castle on Spoon Island might be full of answers. Or it might be empty of the one thing they need most. And while they search, Drew is in that chair, trying to get out of it. What Drew knows, and why it's everything. Let's spend a moment with Drew Kane as a character, because his situation is genuinely unlike anything else happening on this show right now. He has been completely physically incapacitated. He has been used as a prop in a scheme he didn't design and couldn't consent to. He has been taunted by the woman who shot him. He has listened to discussions about whether to kill him as though he were a project management problem rather than a human being. He has been unable to eat independently, speak, communicate his pain or his fear or his rage. And through all of it, he has been paying attention. Every word Willow said. Every visit from Jack and Nina. Every conversation about the black box, about leverage, about running out of drugs, about what comes next if Drew recovers too quickly. He has absorbed it all with the thoroughness of someone who knows that when the moment finally comes, he will only get one chance to tell this story completely. Think about the legal dimensions of what Drew has witnessed. He cannot be cross-examined on details he couldn't have fabricated because he was supposedly locked in and unaware. He heard the conspiracy unfold in real time, in the conspirator's own words, with no filter. He heard Willow admit that the paralysis was chemical, not neurological. He heard Jack suggest his death as an option. He heard Nina and Willow discuss the leverage they planned to use against him. If Drew can communicate this, clearly, credibly, in detail, the case against Willow doesn't need the black box. It doesn't need the traffic cam footage. It doesn't need medical experts arguing about toxicology. It needs Drew Kane sitting across from law enforcement and saying exactly what he heard, in exactly the words they used, with the kind of specificity that only comes from someone who is present for every moment. That's why Willow is so desperately frightened. Not just because Drew is moving, because Drew is a witness. A perfect, involuntary, unimpeachable witness to his own imprisonment. And she was foolish enough to say all of it in front of him. The taunt about double jeopardy protecting her from the shooting charges was perhaps the most revealing moment of Willow's psychology in this entire arc. She said it because she wanted him to feel hopeless. She said it because she wanted him to understand that even if he survived, even if he recovered, she had already accounted for the legal consequences of what she'd done. She was untouchable. What she failed to account for was that the injections, the ongoing, deliberate chemical imprisonment, are not covered by double jeopardy. Each dose is a new act. Each day of forced paralysis is a separate crime. She didn't just shoot Drew twice in a parking lot and walk away. She has been committing crimes against him continuously, in her own home, in a pattern that establishes intent and premeditation in a way that no prosecutor in the country could fail to work with. Drew knows this. His mind has been working through every angle of it in the silence of his captivity. When he finally speaks, he won't just be a victim telling a story. He'll be a strategist delivering a case.